So my name is Mohammed. I've been in the tech industry for probably a little over 17 years now. Actually, I was in college when I was working for a company called Medtronic, a medical device manufacturer. I lived more in the FDA-regulated world of IT there. And then after about 13 years, I moved into the consulting world. So I've been, an independent consultant for several years now. Obviously, somebody that started in this domain, has seen a lot of different changes, and I know some folks who have more experience than I do have seen even greater changes. But I would say the most exciting change that I've seen has been in the AI space. There's been a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of fear, but at the same time, when you have been doing something for a while and then you see how fast and how more efficient it is to be done with AI, it's absolutely amazing. Like, I keep thinking, if I had this back, 10 years ago, how much more could I have been able to produce? But at the same time, there's some negatives, obviously, to it, and hopefully I'll try to, share my experiences there. So one of the things, like when I'm talking to non-technical folks and even technical folks, come to you and ask you, hey, my computer's not working, can you help me with it? Right? So that's usually, I'm living in the software side, and I get these questions a lot. And recently, I've been getting a lot of these AI questions too. So one of the things that I try to explain to people is that, contrary to what's out there, it is not something similar to a human. A human has a gut feeling. They've developed intuition over the years of doing something. So I personally don't see AI ever being able to replace the human from that perspective.
DevNest is a software development partner helping companies build and scale custom software with experienced engineering teams. As AI changes how software gets built, DevNest brings the human judgment, technical depth, and delivery discipline needed to turn ideas into reliable products, not just prototypes. Whether you're building from scratch or scaling an existing product, the DevNest team helps companies develop software that is built to perform and grow. Visit DevNest's website to explore their services and get in touch.
What I see it is a very strong personal assistant. It can help accelerate your ideas. It can help do repeatable things that need to be replaced a lot faster than a human can. I'm still of the believer that it's not really going to be at the level of a human brain. Again, that doesn't mean that there isn't any positives in that space, or that it might not try to head in that direction. From what I've seen, I feel that that's not something that we're going to see anytime soon. And this is in particular when people are asking about it being worried to take over everything and all that kind of stuff. So that's the angle that I'm coming into that. The way another way that I would try to make like a historical parallel for this is when the PC was first becoming introduced as a consumer product back, I think, in the 70s or 60s or wherever Apple really pushed that shift. At the time, there was a lot of why would I need a computer? It's something that big companies would use. It's not something that I would need in my house and all that kind of stuff. But over time, we virtually cannot live without a computer. Every single student has walking around with a laptop. You can't find a business that doesn't operate with some sort of computer machinery on premise. So everything has shifted in that short period of time. And I see AI as something similar to that. We are going to, at least for me, get to a place where you cannot do anything without AI. I'm going to try to make the case for that in a bit here. So the other observation that I have is that AI chat window is going to become the front end of everything. So I generally believe that the way that we're interacting with applications today is going to dramatically change over the next, let's say 5 years, in the sense that everything's going to be interacted through some sort of chat UI or some sort of bot UI. And again, I'll share an example or an experience of why I strongly, something that, some folks in the industry have also alluded to, but more and more of the work that I'm seeing, it's shifting in that direction. That doesn't mean that we are going to completely get rid of systems. You're still going to have your ERPs, your MESs, or whatever it is that's doing the business logic and the heavy lifting behind the scenes. But that UI is going to change dramatically here over the next 5 years, if not sooner. Another thing to keep in mind about AI is that it's an extremely fast accelerator. So literally, and I'm not over exaggerating here, there are projects or tasks that used to take us 3 months to complete. We can complete them in 1 week. I'm not making this on behalf of any AI company, but literally the amount of speed that you're able to get to, and it's only getting better, It's unreal. And when I go to companies, I can literally tell from the speed of delivery whether the team is leveraging AI or not. Over the years, you get a feel of how long a particular task should take. And you can tell from the organizations that are using AI and that have been pushing AI, how fast they're iterating and how fast, they're making releases versus some that are intentionally not using it, or that are still stuck in the old 2 to 3 week type of release cadence. Again, there's some cases where it makes sense. I'm not saying that this applies to everybody, but you'll be able to start seeing those differences. The other part of how my reflection on this is that AI should be treated as an entry-level junior type of person, not as a senior type of person, because this thing can go in a very bad direction if you're not keeping an eye on it. The way I use AI primarily on a day-to-day basis is I record my thoughts if I'm working on a particular project or if I'm working on an idea. Even this presentation here, over the course of 2 weeks, I would just, every time something comes to mind, I would have a chat session open. I would just give it a dump of voice to text input. And, at the very end, I'll tell it to summarize everything and reword it properly and all that kind of stuff so that it helps with, keeping your thoughts together and potentially articulating them better. It's very efficient at that. So that's one way of how I use it on a day-to-day basis. And this one was in a recent, a friend of mine who owns a grocery store, not a grocery store, a restaurant chain, an older gentleman. He's been using, his applications and all that kind of stuff. And he has people pulling reports for him and all that kind of stuff. And he's generally interested in learning how to use AI and all that kind of stuff. So him and I, we sat down, we set up Claude Desktop for him. We connected his QuickBooks and his POS into the Claude session using the connectors that they have. And he started asking it questions about his sales. And his mind was blown just on how easy and how simple it was to bring that data in. And he started asking it some questions that he normally would ask his team. Now, it was giving him some wrong answers for some things. And when I showed him, you can ask it to show me how did you calculate this? And it showed him the raw data that it used to calculate that. And he's like, oh no, this is a test, or this was not, this should have been something that got refunded. So it started helping him identify issues within the process that already existed today that could have taken, months or even not been caught. So again, this goes back to the point of that one UI. So now he's constantly using this thing. He's plugging in other tools and all that kind of stuff to be able to manage and see his business. And I know the security guys on this call right now are screaming probably in their heads, but I've got a statement for that here too. The other point that I'd like to make is, if you're a developer or a tech person, or even if you're not necessarily a tech person, the best way to get the most out of your AI experience is to organize it in a way that is gated. So if you wanted to do a task, for example, if I wanted to build something for me, I want it to go through particular gates, no different than I would be if I have a team of people, working on a specific issue. So let's say in this example, we're building an application. I want to have a tangible requirements document. And I'm not talking about keeping it in the memory type of requirements. I want an actual MD file. And I would sit there and I would talk to it about what the requirements are. And then I would make it, show me the output in a file, and I would review it. And if there's any modifications I need to make, I can make that modification. From there, I would tell it, okay, go ahead and start working on the design. So it has an actual file. It has something that we both agreed on. And then once I see the design document, I could go in and review it and make changes to it as I need. And I feel like if you actually do this within your tools that you're using, whether you're using VS Code or Warp or whatever the ones are out there right now, and again, you emphasize the fact that you cannot move through these stages without an actual approval in the document to see it, it gives you much more better results at the very end. So again, I would be enforcing it to give me a requirements document. I would, I'd have a skill that explains to it how I like seeing requirements, how I want it to be worded. I want to make sure any decisions that we make are recorded. Obviously, whenever you try to build something, there's going to be a hiccup, right? You start deploying something, it breaks, it doesn't work, you have to, do something different. And any decisions we're making, I want it to record that, because what happens is, as these projects get bigger, it might go in a loop and try to break something that we already fixed 2 weeks ago, and now it's trying to do it in a different way and all that kind of stuff. So usually I have all these decision points recorded so that if for whatever reason, which I do a lot, I want to kill the session and start a fresh one because it starts hallucinating, or the context window just gets too much, and you can start sensing it, doing weird things. I just kill the session, start a brand new one, and I point it back to everything that we had already agreed on or we were already doing. And I feel like doing that gives you much more better results long term when you're trying to build something that's long type of engagement. And I also have it do lessons learned. So again, I treat it just as if it's a team of real humans where I'm expecting to see different outputs. And, for example, if it did something and it wasn't right and all that kind of stuff, I can add it to the lessons learned file and all that kind of stuff. So I feel if you do this this type of behavior with the projects that you're working on, it gives you much better results. The other part of things that I see is, and I know it sounds bad, but we have to accept that the data is going to get exposed. Within companies, people are naturally going to go with the least resistant type of solution, and they are going to take the data that's in the company and put it in AI. Even if you do whatever safeguards or if you try to block it or whatever, they're just going to find a way, because it's an easy to use tool. It gives results and all that kind of stuff. So my philosophy is accept that your data is going to get exposed, but focus on the mitigation. Focus on one, trying to teach people on at least how to do it right. And if you did an accident, and I'm guilty of it, I've many times accidentally, passed a secret key or something like that as I'm doing testing and all that kind of stuff. Just know that you have to do something when you do something wrong, which is go rotate that key or just make sure that you're testing in an environment that doesn't have as much privileges as the other one does and all that. So I think if the companies would emphasize the mitigation, emphasize, how to avoid these things and accept the fact that exposures are going to happen and issues are going to happen, you'd have better engagement with the people in the company, and you would be a little bit more prepared for when something really bad is going to take place. And every time I have these type of discussions with folks, I think about, I don't know where I heard it, but I think about this saying is like there's two types of people, those who've been hacked and then those who don't even know it. I honestly think that it's even more true when it comes to AI. We're all dumping our data in there, whether we know it or not. And every once in a while, we'll hear about a company apologizing for misusing the data for training and all that. This is the one thing that I'd hammer home is that accept that exposure is going to happen. Just focus on the mitigation and how to make sure that things are done correctly. I've gotten to a point where, again, I know this is going to come off a little bit rude, but if there's like any work that I'm going to be doing all that kind of stuff, if there's no AI involved in as a tool, I don't even consider it anymore. It's to a point where the value and the benefit just outweighs anything else. I understand that there's some environments where they're regulated differently, like government contracts or HIPAA and all that kind of stuff. But there should be ways to be able to build things and then deploy things properly, or be able to build things on test data or mask data and then deploy things properly. But just having a no AI clause, and I've gotten not contracts, but I've gotten two friends who are working in environments right now where they're not allowed to use AI and they're going crazy. So it's something that if there are any organizations, they just need to know how, or try to work on how to adopt it or put it in correctly. So another thing to keep in mind is, obviously, if you've ever had AI write a paragraph for you or a letter or something like that, and you see how it tries to use words in a crazy way, like it makes it look like it's a novel of the 1900s or something like that. And it over engineers the wording and all that stuff. It has the tendency to do that with code as well. So it's very important that, yes, if you're using AI to develop things, have it, challenge its own self. Maybe switch the model and say, is there a more efficient way of doing this and all that kind of stuff. And you'd be surprised on how many issues it would find or how much cleaner of a code it can come up with. My point on this one is don't necessarily 100% depend on what it's giving you. Always question it. Always, go back and do testing against it. And toggle back and forth between different models to see if there's any gaps or if there's any more efficient way of doing things. Force it to simplify, meaning it sometimes, I'll tell it to create a script for me for, a process within GitHub. And I would look at it and what is this? It's like, no, just do 1, 2, 3, and it comes back and does it. So again, keeping an eye on it is definitely required. The other thing is, one thing I noticed is when you depend on AI too much, and again, I'm struggling with this today. It doesn't give you the opportunity to learn through problems as you used to be able to do when AI didn't exist. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, a server went down and, you're able to get your hands on the logs and you're sitting there, you're digging through the logs, you're trying to figure out what's what. Or I'm sorry, not a server, but an application goes down, you're digging through the logs and trying to figure out what's going on. That exercise, when you do it so many times over the years, makes you the valued employee or gives you that skill set of being really good at troubleshooting and understanding things. The issue with AI is that now when there is an issue, I just grab the logs and send it into the AI and I tell it, figure out what's going on, and it'll tell me, and I know what's going on, and you can resolve it. The thing that happens here is that your brain is not going through the exercise of understanding or troubleshooting or learning. And the way I can, try to do an analogy here is like if you read a book, it's going to embed in your mind. It resonates a lot better. It goes into your memory a lot better. If you listen to the same books over an audiobook, you'll remember it, but it's not as effective as reading it. And if you watch a YouTube summary of that book, it's pretty much gone. You barely remember it over the years. So it's something similar to that. So my point here, what I'm trying to depict here is, if you're working on problems, try to take some time and actually understanding what happened, and even ask AI to explain it to you and try to read through it and all that kind of stuff, just so that you can keep that skill of being valued. And then the last point that I have to make here, one of the things that I'm actually seeing more and more of, I meet with a lot of college students or students fresh out of college that want to get into the industry. And I honestly, I feel very bad for them right now. When I started, I had a lot of senior folks who were training me, they had tasks that would take them time, but they knew that it's a good opportunity for me to work on, to learn and to get experience on, so that they can focus on other things. And if I get stuck on something, I could go talk to them and all that kind of stuff. The problem now is that for senior folks like myself, the time it takes for me to articulate a problem that I need somebody to solve, I could have just had the session just do it for me, right? And it's not giving these entry-level folks the opportunity to work on things and being able to develop that muscle memory of how to solve problems and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know what the long-term impact of this is. I have a strong feeling that once, the senior folks start retiring off, we're going to probably see the impact of that. If you're a senior person and you've got interns or you've got entry-level, please take the time to work with them on actually solving a problem and walking them through how to solve a problem and all that kind of stuff, even if it's faster to get it done in AI, which it is most of the cases. I think this is going to come back and bite the industry, but it's something that I've noticed a lot more of recently, especially when I'm talking to folks that are either in college or straight out of college. So that's all I have. I hope this was valuable, or if you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.